I froze halfway through the toast. My champagne glass trembled in my hand, and for a second, I thought maybe it was just the lighting. Maybe my old eyes were playing tricks. But when the groom leaned forward to kiss my granddaughter, I saw it clear as day. That same crooked smile, the tiny scar above his lip, the face of the man who had once stolen my wife from me, decades ago. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 58 years old, and I have lived long enough to know that life doesn't hand out coincidences that cruel without a purpose. I'm a retired history teacher, a man who thought he had buried his past along with my wife's betrayal. But standing there in that decorated church hall in Atlanta, watching my granddaughter, my sweet Emily, binding herself for life to the ghost of my pain, I felt the ground crack open beneath me. Everyone around me clapped, laughed, and snapped pictures on their phones. Emily's mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue, overcome with joy. And I sat there tasting bile and bitterness, because the man holding my granddaughter's hands wasn't just a stranger. He was the man who had once destroyed my marriage, the man who had slipped into my home as a guest and left as my wife's secret lover. I wish I could tell you I caused a scene right then, that I banged my glass against the table, shouted the truth, and dragged him out by the collar. But I didn't. I swallowed the truth the way I had once swallowed my wife's lies, quietly, painfully, like broken glass sliding down my throat. After the ceremony, while the music blared and guests danced, I stood in a corner watching them, Emily in her white dress twirling, her eyes sparkling, and him, smiling, charming, shaking hands with family as if he belonged among us. My chest burned with resentment, and yet I couldn't break her happiness in one stroke. Not without knowing how deep this rabbit hole went, not without understanding what this man was truly doing here, and why fate had dragged him back into my bloodline. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, staring at a photograph of my late wife, Margaret. She had been gone for 15 years, cancer taking her far too soon. But before her illness, before the hospital beds and whispered prayers, there had been the betrayal, a betrayal I never admitted publicly. A wound I had carried in silence because I didn't want our children to know the ugliness of their mother's choices. And now, here he was, the same man, gray at the temples, but unmistakable. What were the odds? My granddaughter's groom, her future husband, was the same man who once stole my wife's body and maybe her heart. 2 days later, I decided silence was no longer my prison. But before I tell you what I did, let me pause here and ask you something. Where are you watching this from? What city? What state? I want to know how far this story is traveling. Because trust me, by the end, you'll understand that revenge doesn't just heal wounds. It leaves scars others can learn from too. So write it down in the comments. And while you're there, subscribe. This story, you won't want to miss how it ends. The second day after the wedding, I saw him again. His name now was Daniel Ross. At least, that's what Emily called him. But I remembered a different name from years ago. Back then, he had been a smooth-talking intern at the publishing house where Margaret worked part-time. Back then, he had been 26 to her 42. And back then, he had been the reason I stopped trusting the words "I love you." I spotted him outside a cafe downtown, laughing with some colleagues. My fists clenched as I remembered finding the hotel receipts in Margaret's purse all those years ago. The smell of cologne that wasn't mine. I should have walked up to him and ended it right there, but I didn't. Instead, I followed him from a distance, the way a hunter circles his prey. Inside the cafe, I chose a table by the window, hidden enough to watch without being noticed. He carried himself like a man who believed he had earned a second chance at life. His wedding ring gleamed in the light as he scrolled through his phone, smiling at something on the screen. My mind screamed, does Emily know? Does she know the man she married once crept into her grandmother's bed? But then a darker thought struck me. Maybe he wasn't done. Maybe men like him never are. I almost left it there. Almost. But what I did instead shocked even me. I decided to dig. I called an old friend, a former colleague who still had connections at the courthouse. With a little persuasion, I got hold of Daniel Ross's background file, and when I opened it that evening in my living room, my suspicions turned into something sharper, because Daniel Ross wasn't Daniel Ross at all. He had changed his name 15 years ago, right around the same time Margaret passed away. Looking back now, it was the exact second when revenge started breathing inside me. I thought about Emily, about how young she still was at 23, how she believed in love the way children believe in fairy tales, and I thought about the way Margaret used to defend him when I asked questions all those years ago. brushing me off, saying I was jealous, paranoid. My jaw tightened. This wasn't paranoia. This was destiny handing me a knife. I decided to meet him face to face, but not as a grandfather, not as a father-in-law. I would meet him as the man he had wronged first, decades ago, the man he thought was long forgotten. So I called him, my voice steady, my words simple. "Daniel, it's Harold. We need to talk." There was silence on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. He knew exactly who I was, and he said yes. We agreed to meet the following evening. But what happened in that meeting, well, that's when the ground truly shifted beneath us both. Because Daniel had secrets even I didn't expect. I arrived 10 minutes early to the restaurant we had chosen, an old steakhouse downtown, the kind where the lights are dim and the booths are high enough to hide the faces of men who don't want to be seen. The smell of grilled meat hung thick in the air, mixed with the clatter of silverware and the low hum of conversation. I sat at the back corner, facing the door. My hands trembled slightly on the table, though not from fear, from rage, controlled, simmering rage that had been aging in me for decades like whiskey in an oak barrel. When Daniel walked in, I recognized him instantly, though the years had carved lines into his face. He wore a dark blazer, a crisp shirt, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He scanned the room, spotted me, and froze just long enough for me to know that he remembered. Then he straightened his shoulders and walked toward me as though we were two old friends catching up after too much time apart. "Harold," he said, extending his hand. I stared at it, let the silence stretch, then finally shook it. His grip was firm, too firm, like a man trying to prove he still had power. "Daniel," I replied, though the name still tasted false in my mouth. We sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The waiter brought water, menus, and polite smiles. When he left, I leaned forward. "Let's drop the act," I said. "I know who you are, and you know what you did." He didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He simply sighed and looked down at the tablecloth, tracing a finger along the edge. "It was a lifetime ago," he said softly. "She's gone now. Margaret's been gone 15 years. There's no point digging up old graves." My jaw clenched. Hearing her name in his mouth was like salt on an open wound. "Don't you dare say her name to me. You don't get that right. Not after what you did." He looked up, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something. Shame? Regret? Or was it just a performance, and like all the other tricks he'd played on women who trusted him? "You think I haven't carried that weight?" he said. "You think I don't wake up some nights remembering what I did? I was young, Harold, stupid. She was lonely. It was wrong. I know it was wrong." My blood boiled, but I kept my voice low, steady. "You destroyed a marriage. You turned my wife into a liar. You made me a fool in my own home. And now you've married my granddaughter. Tell me, Daniel, is this some sick obsession? A game? Do you want to ruin another Bennett?" He shook his head quickly. No, Harold, you've got it wrong. I love Emily. I truly love her. She doesn't know anything about the past. To her, I'm just Daniel, a man who adores her. And I swear to you, I will never hurt her." I leaned back, studying him. He sounded sincere, but I had heard sincerity before. Margaret used to sound sincere too, every time she said she was working late or going out with a friend. "Love," I muttered bitterly. "That word has been poison in my family thanks to you." We sat in silence for a moment as the waiter returned to take our orders. I barely glanced at the menu. I ordered steak, rare. Daniel ordered chicken. The waiter left, and the silence thickened again. Finally, Daniel spoke. "You could tell her. You could destroy everything for her. But what would that do? She'd hate me. Yes, she'd hate you too for keeping it from her. And it wouldn't change what happened with Margaret. It wouldn't bring her back. All it would do is burn your granddaughter's world to the ground." His words stabbed because they weren't entirely false. Emily was young, hopeful, full of trust. To learn that her new husband had once been her grandmother's lover, it would shatter her. It would stain every memory of her wedding day. But then again, maybe truth is meant to shatter illusions. I sipped my water slowly, letting the thought linger, and then I said something I didn't expect to say. "You're right. Telling her right now would destroy her. But don't think that means I'm letting you walk away clean. No, Daniel. You took something from me that can't be returned, and I intend to take something from you." He frowned. "What are you saying?" I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "You've built yourself a life, a new name, a new identity. You think you've buried the past, I'm going to unearth it. I'm going to peel back every layer until everyone knows who you really are. And when Emily learns the truth, it won't be from a slip of the tongue, it'll be from the wreckage of your own lies." His face paled. For the first time, he looked afraid. "You wouldn't," he whispered. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Watch me." The waiter returned with our food, breaking the tension, but my appetite was gone. I cut into my steak mechanically, barely tasting it. Daniel picked at his chicken, his hands shaking. Neither of us spoke again until the plates were cleared. When we stood to leave, I put a hand on his shoulder. "Sleep well, Daniel. You may find tomorrow brings surprises." He walked out quickly, his posture stiff. I stayed behind, letting the weight of the moment settle. Because I knew something had shifted. The man who once walked into my home with arrogance now walked out of that restaurant with fear, and that fear was mine to control. That night, I dug deeper. I pulled out old boxes from the attic, letters, receipts, scraps of evidence I had once tried to bury. Margaret's handwriting stared back at me, her perfume still faint on some of the paper. I hated her for what she did, and I loved her still, and that contradiction tore at me. But one thing was certain, her lover had a pattern. The next morning, I visited the courthouse myself. Divorce records, financial documents, even old police reports. Daniel's trail was there, faint but visible. 3 name changes in 25 years. Jobs that ended abruptly. Relationships broken. Whispers of affairs. Lawsuits quietly settled. He wasn't just a mistake of my past. He was a predator of many lives. And now he had attached himself to Emily, my granddaughter. As I sat in my car outside the courthouse, clutching the papers, I realized something chilling. Maybe fate hadn't dragged him back to me. Maybe he had chosen Emily on purpose. That thought wouldn't leave me. Had he known who she was from the beginning? Had he sought her out because of me? Because of Margaret? The idea made my skin crawl. I needed proof. So I began watching him. Not every day, too risky, but often enough. I followed him after work, saw where he went. Twice he met with another woman. Once at a park, another time at a hotel. Both times, I took pictures. His hand on her waist, his lips on hers. Emily's groom, barely a week after the wedding, already chasing shadows of Margaret and other women. I sat in my car, camera still warm in my hand, and whispered to myself, "This is how you fall, Daniel. Not by my anger, by your own hunger." But here's the part that even I didn't predict. 2 days later, Daniel showed up at my doorstep. It was late evening, the sun just sinking, the street quiet. He knocked once, hard. When I opened the door, he shoved past me, his face pale and his hands shaking. "Harold," he said, his voice tight. "We need to talk. Now." I almost laughed. "After everything, you come to my house. Bold of you." "This isn't about me," he snapped. "It's about Emily." That caught me off guard. I folded my arms. "What about her?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "She's in danger. You don't know the half of it." I frowned, skepticism heavy in my chest. "Danger? From who? From you?" "No," he said urgently, grabbing my arm. "From someone else. Someone tied to me. Someone who won't stop." I yanked my arm free. "Start making sense of Daniel before I throw you out." He hesitated, glanced around the room like shadows were listening, then whispered words that made my blood run cold. And that's when I realized Margaret's betrayal had been only the beginning of a much larger web. Daniel stood in my living room, pacing like a man with fire at his heels. His hands ran through his hair, his breath uneven, his eyes darting toward the curtained windows as though someone might be watching. I sat in my old leather chair, arms crossed, my gaze never leaving him. He had barged into my home uninvited, carrying talk of danger, of secrets beyond the grave. Part of me wanted to throw him out into the night, but another part, the part that had been restless since the wedding, knew I needed to hear every word. "Say it," I told him. "No riddles, no dramatics. What danger is my granddaughter in?" He stopped pacing, his chest rising and falling heavily. Then, in a voice that trembled despite his effort to sound firm, he said, "Her name is Caroline. Margaret wasn't the only one." The room seemed to shrink around me. "Caroline," he nodded. "Margaret wasn't my first affair. Before her, there was another woman. Married, wealthy, powerful. I was young, reckless. I thought I could have it all. Her love, her money, her promises. But Caroline, She wasn't the forgiving type. When she found out I was seeing Margaret behind her back, she swore she would destroy me. I changed my name Harold. That's why I became Daniel Ross. To get away from her. My fingers tightened on the arm of the chair. And what does that have to do with Emily? She found us, he whispered. She knows where I am. She sent me a message last night. You don't get to start a new life. I'll take from you what you took from me. He swallowed hard. And Harold, I know Caroline. She doesn't bluff. Emily is a target now, not because of who she is, but because she belongs to me. For a long moment, I said nothing. The air between us thickened with ghosts. Margaret's perfume, the memory of hotel receipts, the sting of betrayal, and now this. Another woman, another lie, another storm Daniel had dragged into my family. You expect me to believe this? I asked finally. That some scorned lover from your past has returned like a specter to punish you, and by extension, my granddaughter. His eyes locked onto mine. I don't care if you believe me. Just help me protect her. Please. I almost laughed, though it came out bitter. Hollow. Protect her. The only danger she's in is from you. You're poison, Daniel. You ruin everything you touch. Margaret, Caroline, and now Emily. He flinched as though I had struck him, but he didn't argue. Instead, he sat heavily on the couch, burying his face in his hands. For a moment, I watched him. A younger me might have felt pity, but pity had no place left in me. What I felt instead was a strange clarity. The universe had given me two enemies wrapped in one man, his past and his present. And if Caroline truly existed, then perhaps fate had delivered me the perfect accomplice for vengeance. Still, I said nothing. I let silence gnaw at him until he lifted his head. I know you hate me, he said. I know I deserve it, but Emily doesn't. You've seen her smile. You know how pure she is. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. If Caroline hurts her, it will be because of me, and I can't live with that. I leaned forward, my voice sharp as glass. You should have thought about that 25 years ago when you first decided to crawl into another man's bed. You should have thought about it when you came sniffing around Margaret like a starving dog, but you didn't. And now, the sins of your past are standing at my doorstep. Maybe it's time you paid the price. He shook his head desperately. Please, if not for me, do it for Emily. The way he said her name made my skin crawl. He had no right to speak it with such tenderness, not after everything. But even so, he was right about one thing. Emily didn't deserve to be collateral damage in his endless web of lies. I stood, towering over him. Get out of my house. I'll handle this in my own way. He hesitated. What does that mean? It means, I said, my voice low, steady, that I'll protect Emily. But don't confuse that with protecting you. Whatever's coming for you, Daniel, you deserve it. And when it arrives, I might just open the door for it. His face crumpled, but I didn't give him a chance to respond. I opened the front door wide and pointed to the night outside. Leave. Now. He went, shoulders slumped, the door closing behind him with a dull thud. I stood in the quiet, the clock ticking in the hallway, my heart heavy. Had he told me the truth? Was Caroline real? Or was this just another of his games? Another manipulation designed to keep me from pulling the rug out from under him? I didn't know, but I intended to find out. The next day, I began my own investigation. Retirement had given me time, and bitterness had given me patience. I called a former student of mine, now a detective with the Atlanta PD, and asked if he could discreetly run the name Caroline alongside Daniel's old identity. It took some convincing, but he owed me enough favors from high school days when I covered for him after fights. By evening, he called me back. His voice was low, cautious. Harold, I don't know what kind of trouble you're stepping into, but you need to be careful. Caroline Whitfield isn't just some scorned lover. She's the widow of a powerful real estate developer, millions at her disposal, a family with deep roots in politics. And let's just say, there are whispers she knows how to make problems disappear. The fact that your son-in-law, your granddaughter's husband, ever crossed paths with her is bad enough. If she's coming for him, you might want to keep your distance. His words chilled me, but they also lit a fire. Keep my distance? Not a chance. This wasn't about distance. This was about Emily, and if Caroline Whitfield truly meant harm, then I would be the one standing in her way. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Margaret's face flickering in my memory. Was this her revenge from beyond the grave, to bind me forever to the man who betrayed me? Or was this my chance, finally, to turn betrayal into justice? I turned over, closed my eyes, and whispered into the dark, "Margaret, if you can hear me, give me strength. Because I won't let him ruin another Bennett." 2 days later, I received my answer in flesh and blood. I was walking out of the grocery store, a bag of apples in one hand, when a woman's voice stopped me cold. "Mr. Bennett," I turned. Standing by a black SUV was a woman in her late 50s, elegant in a navy coat, her silver hair tied neatly back. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. "I believe we have something in common," she said. "Daniel Ross, Caroline." The name echoed in my head like a bell tolling. I didn't answer at first. I simply studied her, the way a soldier studies an approaching army. She smiled faintly, though it held no warmth. "Relax," she said. "I didn't come here to harm you. I only wanted to meet the man who's now tied to him. We've both suffered because of Daniel. Perhaps we can help each other." My grip tightened on the grocery bag. "And why should I trust you?" She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "Because unlike him, I don't lie. He ruined my life, Mr. Bennett. He cost me a marriage, respect, years of peace. I know what he did to you as well. Margaret, wasn't it? We are two victims of the same disease. And victims who stand apart are weak. Victims who join forces, well, they can make men like Daniel pay." Her words were smooth, practiced, but there was steel beneath them. I recognized it because I carried the same steel. Still, I wasn't ready to show my hand. "What exactly are you proposing?" She smiled again, wider this time. "Information, resources, and eventually, justice. But first, I need you to decide. Are you ready to stop being silent, Mr. Bennett? Or will you let him continue poisoning your family tree?" For the first time in years, I felt something new stirring inside me. Not just rage, not just grief, but the spark of alliance. But alliances built on vengeance are dangerous things. I looked her in the eye and I said, "Tell me everything." That evening, Caroline sat in my kitchen, sipping tea while her SUV waited like a shadow outside. She told me stories of Daniel's lies, his schemes, his endless need to take without giving. And with each story, I saw Margaret's ghost, clearer. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just her. Daniel had left a trail of broken lives, and Caroline had spent years tracking him, waiting for the moment to strike. And now, fate had tied him to my granddaughter. As she spoke, I realized something important. Caroline wanted revenge, yes, but more than that. She wanted destruction. She wanted Daniel ruined beyond repair, stripped of everything. And I wanted that too, but I also wanted something else. I wanted Emily safe. The balance between those two desires would be the hardest road I'd ever walked. That night, after Caroline left, I stood at the window watching her SUV vanish into the dark. My reflection stared back at me, older, tired, scarred, but in my eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Purpose. I whispered to myself. Looking back now, this was the exact second when revenge started breathing inside me. Not the day of the wedding, not the steakhouse, not even when Daniel begged in my living room. No, tonight, the plan began. Because now I had an ally, and together, we would make Daniel pay. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that Emily herself would soon uncover a piece of the puzzle. And when she did, everything I thought I was controlling would slip through my fingers. The morning after Caroline's visit, I sat at my kitchen table staring at her business card. Heavy cardstock, embossed letters, no phone number, only her name and the family crest. It wasn't an invitation, it was a declaration. She wanted me to remember that she was power incarnate. I turned the card over in my hands when I heard the familiar sound of footsteps on the porch. Light, quick, followed by a knock. "Grandpa," Emily's voice. I tucked the card into my pocket before opening the door. There she was, my granddaughter, her hair pulled back in a simple bun, her smile as bright as sunlight breaking through storm clouds. But her eyes had shadows now, married less than a week, and already she looked older. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, hugging her gently. "What brings you here?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "Can I sit down? I needed someone to talk to." I guided her inside, poured her some coffee, and waited. She wrapped her hands around the mug, staring at the steam as though it held answers. "Grandpa," she said finally, her voice low, "do you ever feel like people aren't who they say they are?" My chest tightened. "Why do you ask?" She took a shaky breath. "Daniel's been distant. He leaves early, comes home late. Sometimes I smell perfume on his jacket. And when I ask, he laughs it off. I know it sounds silly, but her eyes brimmed with tears. I'm scared, Grandpa. Scared that I married a stranger. The words cut through me like a blade. My instinct was to pull her close, tell her everything, expose Daniel's filth in the light of day. But another instinct, just as strong, told me to wait, to time my strike perfectly. I put my hand over hers. Emily, listen to me. People carry secrets, yes, some heavier than others. But you're not silly for noticing, you're wise. Don't doubt that wisdom. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I just don't know if I should confront him. What if I'm wrong? What if I ruin everything before it's even begun? I squeezed her hand. Sometimes the truth ruins things on its own. You don't have to force it. You just have to be ready when it comes knocking. Her lips trembled into a half smile. You always know what to say. If only she knew how much I wasn't saying. That evening, I called Caroline. She answered on the first ring, her voice cool and deliberate. Mr. Bennett, Emily suspects something, I told her. She feels it. Caroline chuckled lightly. Of course she does. Daniel has never been skilled at fidelity. Women like him are slaves to appetite. It's only a matter of time before she sees his mask slip. I paced the length of my living room. I don't want Emily broken. I want her safe. Whatever we do, it has to protect her first. Agreed, Caroline said. But protection does not mean comfort. Sometimes pain is the only shield. If she learns who he truly is, she will despise him, and despising him is safer than loving him. Her words echoed in me. Yes, hate could be a shield. It had shielded me for decades. But could Emily bear that weight at 23? What do you propose? I asked. There was a pause. Then Caroline's voice sharpened. Evidence. Give her evidence she cannot deny. Show her who Daniel really is. Let her choose. Once she chooses, we will dismantle him together. Evidence. I already had some. The photos of him with other women. But Caroline meant more than infidelity. She wanted Emily to see the depth of his lies, his past, his rot. I thought of the old letters, the receipts, the court documents. I thought of Margaret's face whenever I asked too many questions. And for the first time, I considered weaponizing my own wounds. The next day, I followed Daniel again. This time, I watched him enter a hotel with a woman nearly half his age. They didn't emerge for hours. When they finally did, laughing, her lipstick smudged, his tie loosened, I was there across the street with my camera. Snap, snap, snap. Each photo was a nail in his coffin. Later that week, Caroline arranged a meeting. We sat together in her SUV, the leather seats cold beneath me. She flipped through the photos with satisfaction, her manicured fingers lingering on each one. Perfect, she murmured. Infidelity is the gateway drug. Once Emily sees this, she'll start asking questions. And questions, Harold, are the cracks where truth slips in. I studied her profile in the dim light. She was beautiful still, in a severe way, but there was hardness etched into her features. Revenge had shaped her into marble. What happens after? I asked. She turned to me, her smile thin. After, we strip him bare, financially, socially, spiritually. He will be left with nothing but his sins. And when he begs for mercy, we will remind him that mercy is a language he never learned. Her words should have comforted me. Instead, they chilled me. Because I realized then that Caroline didn't just want justice, she wanted annihilation. And maybe, deep down, so did I. A week later, Emily came to me again. This time, she didn't knock gently. She burst through the door, her face pale, her hands trembling. Grandpa, she gasped. I found something. I led her to the couch, my heart pounding. What is it? She pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse. It was a receipt, dated 2 nights prior, from the same hotel where I had seen Daniel, a hotel far from their home. I was doing laundry, she whispered. It was in his jacket. He said he was working late that night. Tears filled her eyes. Grandpa, is he cheating on me? The question hung in the air, heavy as lead. I wanted to lie, to protect her, to keep her in the bubble of innocence just a little longer. But the photos in my drawer, the documents in my attic, the card in my pocket, they all screamed that the time for silence was over. I took her hands, looked into her eyes, and said, Emily, there are things about Daniel you don't know, things I've been keeping from you, but I think it's time you saw them for yourself. Her lips parted, confusion flashing across her face. What do you mean? I stood, walked to the study, and returned with a folder thick with photographs. I laid them out on the coffee table one by one. Daniel, with the woman in the park. Daniel kissing the woman outside the hotel. Daniel laughing with her as they walked away. Emily's breath came sharp and fast. She covered her mouth with her hand. No, this can't be real. It's real, I said softly. And it's only the beginning. She looked at me then, her eyes wide with betrayal and fear. How do you know all this? Why have you been following him? I hesitated. This was the moment, the threshold between silence and truth. Because, Emily, I said, my voice breaking, Daniel Ross isn't who you think he is. He never was. Her tears spilled over. Then who is he? I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, my phone buzzed on the table. A message from Caroline. It's time. Bring her to me. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Caroline wanted Emily in the loop. She wanted her as part of the plan. But was I ready to hand my granddaughter over to the fire of vengeance? I looked at Emily, broken and trembling, clutching the receipt like a lifeline, and I realized that the choice I made next would decide everything. Emily sat across from me, her hands trembling as she clutched the hotel receipt. The photographs I'd spread across the table were scattered now, some crumpled from her grip, others damp from her tears. Her world was cracking, piece by piece, and I was the one who had chosen to hand her the hammer. Grandpa, she whispered, her voice raw, I don't understand. Why would you be following him? Why would you keep pictures of my husband with another woman? I took a deep breath, steadying myself, because I needed proof, because I knew this would happen. Daniel isn't who you think he is. He never was. And he's been lying to you from the very beginning. Her eyes, red-rimmed and wide, searched mine. Then tell me, who is he? My throat felt dry as dust. The words clawed at me, begging to be released. But they carried decades of pain with them. I had never spoken of Margaret's betrayal aloud. Not to my children, not even to myself in the stillness of night. Now those buried wounds demanded air. Before you were born, I began slowly, long before your wedding, there was another life. Your grandmother Margaret, she was everything to me. We built a home, raised a family, dreamed of the future. But during those years, she carried a secret lover. Emily's face paled, her lips parting in disbelief. I forced myself to continue. His name wasn't Daniel back then. He went by another. He was younger, charming, ambitious, and he became the shadow in our marriage. I found hotel receipts, letters, little pieces that told a story I couldn't deny. Margaret swore it meant nothing, but it was enough to break me, enough to turn every "I love you" into a question mark. Emily pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely. You're saying, Daniel, my husband? I nodded, the weight of it nearly crushing me. Yes, the man you married was once the man who betrayed me with your grandmother. She shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. No, that's impossible. He's 38. Grandma would have been older, I said quietly. Yes, much older, but it happened. I was there. I lived it, and I carry the scars still. Emily shook her head violently, pacing the room like a caged bird. You're lying. You have to be lying. Why would you keep this from everyone? Why would you wait until now to say something? Her words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. Because I thought the past was buried with Margaret. Because I never wanted you or your mother to know the ugliness that lived beneath our roof. I wanted you to remember her as a good woman, not as the woman who betrayed her vows. But fate has a way of dragging skeletons into the light, Emily. And now he's here, smiling in family photos, standing beside you as if he hasn't destroyed enough lives. She stopped pacing, her shoulders trembling. When she turned to me again, her expression was shattered glass. Fear, anger, grief, all jagged in one. So what now? She asked. What do I do? What am I supposed to do with this? I wanted to tell her to run, to pack her bags, leave Daniel, and never look back. But before I could, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Caroline. She deserves the truth. Bring her tonight. Emily noticed the vibration, her eyes narrowing. Who's that? Who else knows about this? I hesitated too long, and that was answer enough. Grandpa, she said, her voice rising. What are you hiding? Who are you talking to? I sighed, the fight draining from me. Her name is Caroline Whitfield. She was another woman from Daniel's past. He hurt her too. She's been watching him for years. And now she wants him destroyed. Emily's hands balled into fists. And you're working with her. Yes. I admitted, because Daniel doesn't just lie. He corrodes. He leaves wreckage wherever he goes, and I won't stand by and let you be his next casualty. She sank back onto the couch, her face in her hands. This is insane. This is my life, my marriage. And you're telling me it's built on decades of lies I never asked for. I sat beside her, laying a hand gently on her back. Emily, listen to me. You deserve better. Better than secrets. Better than betrayal. You deserve a man who doesn't carry ghosts into your bed. The truth is ugly, but it's the only weapon we have. She lifted her head, her eyes blazing through the tears. Then I want to hear it all. No more half-truths. No more waiting. If Caroline has answers, I want them. Tonight. Her words struck me like thunder. She wasn't the child I'd spent years protecting. She was a woman now, and she wanted blood as much as I did. I nodded slowly. Then tonight, you'll hear everything. Later that evening, I drove Emily to Caroline's estate. The mansion rose from the hill like a sentinel, its windows glowing faintly against the dark. Security lights lined the driveway, and guards watched us approach with impassive faces. Emily gripped my arm as we walked to the door. Who is this woman? Someone who knows Daniel's sins as well as I do, I said. Someone who lost everything because of him. The door opened before we could knock. Caroline herself stood there, elegant in a black dress, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier light. She smiled faintly at Emily, though it carried no warmth. You must be the bride, she said. Emily stiffened. And you must be the ghost my grandfather's been whispering to. Caroline chuckled softly. Smart girl. Come in. We followed her into a grand sitting room lined with bookshelves and oil paintings. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. Caroline gestured for us to sit, then poured wine into crystal glasses. I don't want wine, Emily said sharply. I want the truth. Caroline's eyes gleamed. Then you shall have it. She began to speak, her voice calm, measured, rehearsed. She told Emily about her affair with Daniel, how he had promised her love, whispered of leaving her husband, only to betray her with Margaret. She spoke of the humiliation, the scandal, the rage that had driven her to track him across states, through name changes and new identities. Emily listened, her face pale, her hands clenched tight in her lap. Each word seemed to carve deeper into her. When Caroline finished, Emily turned to me, her eyes brimming. It's all true, isn't it? Every word? I nodded slowly. Yes. She covered her face with her hands, her body shaking. God, I married a monster. Caroline leaned forward, her voice smooth as silk. Not a monster, dear. Monsters are rare. Daniel is worse. He's ordinary. Ordinary men who destroy lives without thinking are far more dangerous. Emily looked up, her eyes hardening through the tears. So what happens now? Caroline glanced at me, then back at Emily. Now, my dear, we take back what he stole from us. We tear down the house of lies he built, and when he's standing in the ruins, we leave him to rot. Emily's breath caught. She looked between us, her grandfather and this stranger, both scarred by the same man. Slowly, she nodded. I want to help. My heart twisted. Part of me wanted to stop her, to shield her from the fire we were about to unleash. But another part knew there was no turning back now. She had seen too much. She had chosen her side. Caroline smiled, raising her glass in a mock toast. Welcome to the war, Emily. Over the next week, the three of us worked in shadows. Caroline used her connections to dig into Daniel's finances. I provided the documents from the past, the proof of his identity changes, the trail of affairs. Emily, still reeling, began quietly gathering her own evidence. Texts, unexplained receipts, whispered lies. It was a strange alliance, a grieving granddaughter, an embittered widow, and an old man nursing wounds that never healed. But together, we became something sharp, something Daniel wouldn't see coming. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. Revenge is fire, and fire doesn't care what it burns. As I watched Emily pore over photos of her husband with other women, her face hard and cold, I wondered if I had made a mistake, if in trying to save her, I had simply handed her the same curse that had consumed me. One night, as we sat around Caroline's polished table, Emily spoke. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I thought I was done with surprises, she said, but life had one waiting right around the corner. I married a man who destroyed my grandmother's marriage. I trusted a man who's been lying since before I was born, and now I see him for what he is. But I'm not broken. I'm angry, and I want him to feel every ounce of that anger. Caroline clapped her hands softly. Bravo. Anger is power. Use it well. I said nothing. Because inside, I feared anger would be the very thing that destroyed her. The night we chose to confront Daniel was cold. The kind of cold that creeps into your bones. We arranged to meet him at the same steakhouse where he and I had first spoken. But this time he wouldn't be facing one old man with a grudge. He'd be facing 3 people, bound together by the pain he'd caused. As Emily and I drove there, she sat in silence, staring out the window. I wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her she could still walk away, but I didn't, because I knew the fire in her now. And once fire starts, there's no stopping it. When we arrived, Caroline was already inside, her posture regal, her smile sharp. Daniel walked in minutes later, his expression guarded, his eyes flicked between us, landing finally on Emily. He froze. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low. Emily rose slowly, her tears long dried. "This," she said, "is the end of your lies." And that was the moment the first domino fell. But what happened after, the revelations, the confessions, the collapse of everything, none of us were truly prepared for, because Daniel had one last secret, and it was the kind of secret that could tear not just my granddaughter's marriage apart, but our entire family. The steakhouse felt colder than it had weeks earlier when Daniel and I first sat across from one another. This time, the air was thick with expectation, like the moments before a storm breaks. Caroline sat tall at the head of the booth, regal and dangerous, her glass of wine untouched. Emily sat beside me, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes locked on Daniel with a glare I had never seen in her before. Daniel stood frozen at the edge of the table, his face pale. He looked from Caroline to me, then to Emily, and when his eyes landed on her, his voice cracked. "Emily, what are you doing here?" Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "Watching you unravel, just like you made my grandmother unravel, just like you made Caroline unravel. You lied to me, Daniel, and tonight, you answer for it." He slid into the booth slowly, his movements cautious, like a man approaching a cliff's edge. His eyes darted between us. "So this is what it is, a tribunal, a trial." Caroline's smile was thin as paper. "No trial, Daniel. Just truth. Finally, truth." I leaned forward, my voice heavy with years of bitterness. "You think you could bury the past under a new name, a new smile, a new life, but ghosts don't stay buried. Not Margaret's, not Caroline's, and certainly not mine." Daniel swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He turned to Emily, his voice desperate. "I love you. Whatever they've told you, whatever they've dug up, it doesn't change that. I love you." Emily's laugh was sharp and broken. "Love? You kissed another woman in a hotel room a week after our wedding. You whispered lies into my grandmother's ear decades ago. You don't love. You consume." Caroline tapped her glass with a manicured nail. "Well said, dear. He's not a man. He's a hunger-wearing skin." Daniel's eyes narrowed at her. "And you're still obsessed. All these years, Caroline. Still chasing me like a shadow. Why can't you let it go?" Her face hardened. "Because you took everything from me. My marriage, my reputation, my peace. You didn't just betray me, Daniel. You branded me with your filth. And now, finally, you pay." Daniel's fists clenched. "You all think you know me, but you don't. You've only seen pieces. Do you want the whole truth? Fine. Here it is. I didn't chase Margaret. I didn't chase Caroline. They chased me. Your grandmother, Harold, she came to me first. Lonely, desperate, we'd starved for something you weren't giving her. She begged me not to leave her, and I was weak enough to say yes." The words landed like stones in my chest. For a moment, my breath caught. I wanted to deny it, to shout him down, but a part of me remembered Margaret's eyes in those years. The distance, the sadness. Could it be true? Emily slammed her hand against the table. "Stop lying." Daniel turned to her, his eyes shining now with something like pain. "I'm not lying, and you deserve to know everything. The night Margaret died, she called me. She wanted to see me one last time. I didn't go. I couldn't. I thought it was over. But I've carried that guilt for 15 years. You think I haven't suffered? You think I haven't hated myself?" Silence fell over the table. Caroline's expression flickered, torn between fury and something almost like pity. Emily's tears brimmed again, her anger colliding with grief. And me, I sat there, my hands trembling, my heart pounding with memories of hospital corridors and Margaret's frail smile in her final days. Could she really have wanted him at the end? Had I been the husband in the house but not the man in her heart? I clenched my fists. Even if that's true, Daniel, it changes nothing. You betrayed your vows, your promises, your word, and now you've betrayed my granddaughter. Daniel leaned forward, his voice sharp. And what about you, Harold? You spent decades hating me in silence, letting Margaret die with her secret still safe. You could have told your children. You could have told Emily long ago, but you didn't. You wanted to protect your pride. You're not her savior. You're just another coward who couldn't face the truth. His words stung like lashes. But before I could respond, Emily spoke. Enough, she said, her voice breaking. She stood, her body trembling with fury and heartbreak. I've heard enough. You disgust me, Daniel. You make me sick. She pulled the ring from her finger and dropped it onto the table. The sound of it clinking against the wood echoed like a final bell. Daniel's face crumpled. Emily, please. But she cut him off. Don't you dare say my name again. You've tainted it enough. She turned to me, her eyes burning. Grandpa, I want him gone. From my life, from this family. I don't care how. Just make him gone. Her words were a knife to my chest. She was no longer asking to be protected. She was commanding me to end it. And I realized in that moment that the cycle of betrayal and vengeance had passed into her veins too. Caroline leaned back, satisfaction glinting in her eyes. Well, Harold, there it is. Permission from the victim herself. Now we finish this. But even as she spoke, I felt something shift inside me. For years, revenge had been my fuel. For months, I had dreamed of this reckoning. And now, here it was. My granddaughter spitting out Daniel's name like poison, my ally ready to burn him to ashes, and yet, I felt no triumph, only emptiness. Daniel sat slumped, his face pale, his hands shaking. For all his sin, he looked small now, weak, pathetic, and I wondered, would crushing him really bring us peace, or would it simply chain us tighter to the very man we despised? I looked at Emily, then at Caroline. We have enough evidence to ruin him, I said. We don't need to destroy ourselves in the process. We'll give the photos to the court, file for annulment, expose him for fraud and deceit. Let the law carve him open. Caroline's eyes narrowed. The law is weak. He'll find another name, another victim. Not this time, I said firmly. This time, the world will see him for what he is, and he won't be able to hide again. Emily nodded slowly, her face hard. As long as I never have to see him again, as long as he never touches this family again. I placed my hand over hers. You won't. I promise. Daniel looked up at me then, his eyes hollow. You think this ends me? You think exposing me changes what's already done? Margaret's ghost will haunt you forever, Harold. And Emily, you'll never forget that your first love was a lie. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I said quietly, maybe, but at least now, the lie is over. I stood, guiding Emily with me. Caroline remained seated, her eyes cold, her fingers drumming against the table. She wanted blood, not closure, but this wasn't her war anymore. It was mine, and Emily's. We walked out together, leaving Daniel in the booth, staring at the ring that no longer belonged to him. In the weeks that followed, the plan unfolded swiftly. Caroline leaked the photos and documents to her contacts in the press. The story spread like wildfire. Daniel Ross, serial liar, trail of affairs, history of deceit. Emily filed for annulment, and the court moved quickly once his past identities came to light. He lost his job, his home, his reputation. By the end of the month, Daniel was a ghost. Caroline celebrated quietly, her revenge complete at last. But I saw no joy in Emily, only exhaustion. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, she spoke softly. Grandpa, do you think I'll ever trust again? I reached for her hand. Trust isn't about others, Emily. It's about yourself. Trust that you'll see the signs next time. Trust that you deserve better. Trust that love, real love, is worth waiting for. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, her tears dampening my shirt. I just wish Grandma were here. I wish I could ask her why. I swallowed hard, staring at the horizon. Some questions never get answered, but that doesn't mean we stop living. It just means we live stronger, wiser. We sat in silence as the sun dipped below the trees, and for the first time in decades, I felt the weight lift. Not because revenge had healed me, it hadn't, but because Emily had survived, and because I had finally spoken the truth that had rotted inside me for so long. The wound would always be there, but wounds can scar, And scars, in their own way, are proof we endured. So here I am, telling you this story. Not because revenge fixed everything, not because it erased betrayal, but because silence is poison, and truth, no matter how jagged, is the only cure. If you've carried a secret, if you've swallowed betrayal like broken glass, know this. You are not alone. We endure, we scar, we rise. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from? What city? What state? Share your story in the comments. And if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever found strength in the ashes, know this. Your voice matters. Because revenge may burn, but dignity, that survives.